Hello, and welcome to the FarmHouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
Recently, I spoke with Tonya Van Slyke, who, up until recently, was the Executive Vice President of Industry Relations at the Northeast Dairy Producers Association. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, NEDPA has been around for a little over 30 years and works to support and represent dairy farmers through advocacy and providing resources. Tonya has spent her career advocating for farm safety, sustainability, and producer well-being, work that has earned her several honors, including the New York State Fair's Leaving It Better Award, which recognized her work and impact on the agricultural community. She's now working as the interim executive director of Milk for Health, a 75-year-old organization in New York that works to highlight all the great stuff dairy farmers are doing. She has done and seen a lot, and I can't wait to let her share her experiences with you. Tonya, welcome to the FarmHouse. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your journey in agriculture. Did you grow up farming? How did you get into the industry?
So my journey in agriculture started growing up on a dairy farm in central New York. So I grew up on about a 250 cow dairy farm in Cortland County. And I think my quest to be a leader in the industry came from my involvement in both 4-H and FFA. So I was a New York State FFA district president and state officer. And then beyond that, national PAS officer, post-secondary agriculture students at the collegiate level. And so that's really where my desire to utilize my voice and be an advocate for the industry came from.
All right. I like that, like already within those organizations, it wasn't enough to be just a part of it. Like, it sounds like you were taking leadership roles on fairly early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I was always inspired by those around me. So anybody who knows me knows that I say it's about the people. It's always about the people. So I had a school administrator in Homer who wanted to grow our ag program in our high school. And so she worked really hard to attract farm students to get involved in FFA. And she taught us to dream. She taught us to lead. And I had an ag teacher, Kathy Pratt, who drove me all over the state in order to compete and be part of leadership programs. And so it starts with the people. And I had great mentors and people who supported me along with, my family on our home farm. So farming with my dad and my uncle and my brothers and my grandparents, I just was always inspired to learn more and to bring home what I learned. So I think I've just been surrounded by great mentors my whole life.
That's great. So tell us about how you got involved with the Northeast Dairy Producers Association, and if you could touch on what that organization does as well.
Sure. So I was, prior to joining NEDPA, the Northeast Dairy Producers Association, I worked at the Veterinary College of Medicine at Cornell University as a project manager. And so I worked with a lot of dairy farms through the project that I facilitated, as well as I have a passion for farm safety. So I had worked to do farm safety education in conjunction with both Cornell University and with NICAM, the New York Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health. And that allowed me to travel across the state teaching farm safety with my colleague, Lisa Ford, who did translation, and really get to know a lot of farmers. So when the Northeast Dairy Producers Association Board of Directors, when they dared to dream to say, what's the next step for our organization, they decided they needed a full-time executive director, and they really wanted to continue to be the voice of the dairy industry in New York. So for the first probably 15 years of the organization, started in 1993 with a commitment to environmental stewardship, the producer leaders and the staff worked very much behind the scenes. So they were very happy to work behind the scenes to help make things happen, and really be a leader in environmental stewardship and make sure farmers had a voice in the regulation that took place with the CAFO permit in New York. And so when the board did a strategic plan back in 2011, 2012, they dared to dream. And then they did a search for an executive director. So I got recruited to apply because of my work with farmers and farm safety and the work at the College of Veterinary Medicine. And at the time, I actually wasn't looking for a job. But when I went through the interview process, which was to show how I would work alongside the farmer leaders to implement their strategic plan, I knew I wanted the job. I knew I was excited. And I knew that I would learn every day. And so I think that that is really what's exciting about the Northeast Dairy Producers Association. It is farmer-led. And when they approach challenges that the dairy industry is facing, they approach them with solutions. So I would always, when we went to Albany to help educate about different issues or different opportunities or challenges, we would talk about, here's the challenge, but here's what we think the solution is. And so I think that that is what kept me so engaged and so ignited at NEDPA, working alongside farmer directors and our talented staff, is that they were solutions based.
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of a big change, right? Because you're going from one almost not quite niche, but, farm safety is a contained topic. And now as the director or executive director, you've got to know all of it, or at least a little bit about everything. How was that learning curve, or how was that transition for you?
It's about the people. So you cannot be an expert at everybody, but you need to know who your people are. Who are the experts? So what I say is you build bridges. So who are the experts in environmental stewardship? Who are the experts in labor, whether it be immigration reform or whether it be proactive labor policy? And so I think the success that I had in working alongside the board of directors and our staff was building bridges and building collaborative partnerships. So ironically, right after I got hired at NEDPA, the OSHA came out with a New York Dairy local emphasis program for dairy farms. They called it the Dairy Dozen. So I was able to dive right into something that I was personally passionate about, had a little bit of a background in, but also build bridges. So we worked a lot with ProDairy at Cornell University with their team, right? The folks that are experts on the environmental systems front. So when you approach farm safety, you approach it from, the human health standpoint, but then you also have to look at farm systems. So we partnered with ProDairy to do two things. One, to help educate the OSHA inspectors about what they would encounter when they came to do farm walkarounds, farm inspections, but also to do outreach to farmers. What does this mean? At the time, we worked very closely with Dairy Business Associates of Wisconsin as a partner organization in another, dairy state. And so at the time, Lori Fisher was the executive director at DBA. And I called Lori and said, Lori, who do we need to work with? You have this dairy LEP. And she led us to Michael Best Friedrich, who was the law firm that they utilized at the time, who did a lot of outreach on OSHA. They had an attorney who specializes in labor and OSHA compliance. And so we brought them to New York to do outreach education. We brought somebody who does farm walkarounds, and we drove around the state for an entire week teaching farmers about what an OSHA inspection should look like. So to answer your question, it never was about just my expertise. It was about finding the right people to bring to the table. And at NEDPA, as we started to enter the labor front, we knew that we needed other partners. So we reached out to partners across the industry and said, how about we start a proactive labor group? And so everybody who I called said, great idea, let's do it. And so we formed the Ag Workforce Development Council, the AWDC. And it was all volunteerism from folks in the dairy cooperatives to partner organizations to ProDairy to Farm Credit East, to the New York State Vegetable Growers Association, the New York State Horticulture Society. And we came together and we said, what do we need to be proactive on the workforce front? And we dreamt, we had big ideas. We dared to dream. And we started a labor roadshow, which still exists today, where we traveled around the state. The first year, I think we did education to over 500 farmers on labor compliance. What are the labor issues that are facing us? What are compliance? What are some proactive things you can do to increase or improve, workforce on your farms? And then we realized, wow, there's a real need. And so we approached Cornell and said, we need somebody who wakes up thinking about workforce development and goes to sleep thinking about workforce development. And Cornell said, we agree. And so we worked together and they hired Dr. Richard Stupp, who runs the Cornell Ag Workforce Program. He has since built his team, and now farmers have a go-to for workforce development. And so it's really about daring to dream, finding the right partners, and striving to move forward.
Right. So I'm curious, what does workforce development look like on a dairy farm? Because that's a phrase that can mean a lot of different things depending on what industry you're in.
So a lot of different things. So one is making sure you understand what the labor regulations are. Another is taking a look at your workforce. What can we do? How can we improve communication? If we have entry level folks that have a pathway or have a desire to have a pathway toward middle management, how do they get there? What tools do they need? What education do they need? So, Ag Workforce Development offers bilingual programming for middle managers and upper managers. They have continued the Labor Roadshow. They do work on farm worker housing, so helping farmers who want to improve housing or build new farm worker housing. What are the standards? What are the regulations that are needed? Where are some resources to share from other farmers who've made improvements to housing? They also act as a liaison with like Department of Labor on, how can we gather more funding to have more programming. And so workforce development looks like a lot of things. Farm safety. I think it's 2 years ago now, we did a group of us a lean system approach to farm safety. So how do we take a look at lean? How do we take a look at how we make improvements on our farms through a systems approach? And so workforce development has looked like a lot of things, and it's fun, and we learn as we go, and we identify where we're meeting the mark and where we still have opportunities.
Great. So going back to, your work in farm safety as a safety educator, I think most people who are even passingly familiar with farming are aware that it can be a dangerous occupation. But what are some health or safety topics that you found often maybe surprised people when you were, entering farms?
So I think that it's human nature for employees to not want to disappoint. So when we first started doing farm safety training, when Lisa and I were traveling around the state, what we realized is that some employees were lacking basic education or they didn't ask questions. And so the more we did education, and I know NICAM is very good at this on, for example, chemical safety, what chemicals to never mix, how they can be harmful to the human body. Some individuals have pre-existing health conditions where certain chemicals on farms or certain environments might be more hazardous to them. So making sure that they understand that and we identify that and we find solutions for them in the workplace. Personal protective equipment, how to use it, when to use it, helping workers understand the importance of using it. And then, in the basics of just developing a farm safety program, sometimes it's overwhelming. Where do I start? So one of the things NICAM did was really develop a template for farm safety programs. And the one thing about farm safety or commitment to environmental stewardship or commitment to workforce development, there's a key phrase that goes along with all this, which is continuous improvement, right? You can't just create a program and put it on a shelf. You have to create a program and you have to evaluate it. What has changed? What needs to change? What do we need to retrain on? And so I think whether it's farm safety or environmental stewardship or workforce development, and helping employers understand that you don't just check a box, you have to have a commitment to continuous improvement.
Right. I can definitely see, as you're talking, how the workforce development and these efforts toward continuous farm safety, they really do go hand in hand. All right. So the Northeast Dairy Producers Association, it celebrated 30 years a couple years ago in 2023. And, we here at Lancaster Farming, we're actually celebrating 70 years this year. And, these anniversaries, they really make you reflect, right? They make you reflect on where your organization has come, what the industry has been looking like over the last, few decades. So regarding 30 years at NEDPA, what do you consider have been the biggest changes or accomplishments in that time?
So the biggest success that NEDPA has always had is to attract dedicated farmers to their board, right? So they serve as a board of directors, they serve as guidance to the staff, and they're forward thinking and they're thinking about continuous improvement for the organization, for the industry as a whole. And so that has been an ongoing success since day one of NEDPA, since before it became an organization, and it was driveway conversations as farmers have about how do we, if we are going to be regulated about how the nutrients are going to be managed on our farm, then we want to have a seat at the table. And so that has, I think, really been the success of NEDPA, is that we have made sure that the farmer voice is always engaged and has a seat at the table. So you've heard me talk a little bit about a lot about farm safety, but I want to switch to what NEDPA was founded on, which was environmental stewardship. And so as we have the CAFO permits get renewed, we've always had a seat at the table. Farmers have always had a seat at the table to talk about what's working well in the permit, but also to hear from DEC about where they would like to see us go in terms of the next steps of our commitment to environmental stewardship. And then we talk about that. And it always comes back to water quality, right? Water quality is important to the success of a farm because cows drink so much water, and it's such a large component of their milk. And so water quality is very important to the farm, and so environmental stewardship therefore is very important to the farmers. So we've had a seat at the table in the CAFO permit. One of the things that NEDPA did was said, not only do we need to be talking with DEC, right, with our regulatory agency, but we also need to be talking amongst each other. So let's bring the other organizations together, and let's bring some of the CAFO planners, some of the nutrient managers, some engineers, and then invite the state agencies to join us. So I want to say it was probably in the around 2014, 15, we formed the water quality work group where we could come together internally, right, with agriculture. Pro Dairy is obviously part of that, and talked about what do we need? Where are we at with regulation? What kind of outreach do we need to be doing to the farmers? Who does that? Is it Pro Dairy? Is it DEC? Is it DEC and Ag and Markets? And then we've helped ensure that that outreach education has happened. And then how do we look forward? And so now we're under a tenure permit. And I would say that the success that we've had in environmental stewardship in New York State under the CAFO permit has been because we've been recognized as farmers who are committed to continuous improvement, and we want to be solutions-based, and we want to have a seat at the table. And so I think NEDPA's success really gets attributed to farmers using their voice, having a seat at the table, and being forward-thinking and thinking about the industry as a whole. And I want to be really clear about that, right? So, NEDPA directors get on that board to serve their industry. And so they're looking at their industry as a whole. And I'm just really, really proud of that. And then on the workforce development, I talked about Ag Workforce Development Council. We've worked over the years, lots of fly-ins to Washington, D.C. to advocate for immigration reform. But then when New York introduced the Farm Labor Fair Labor Practices Act, NEDPA worked collaboratively with other organizations. We formed Grow New York Farms, the Grow New York Farms Coalition, so that we could advocate together to have a voice with farm workers, farm owners, and industry partners alike to talk about what it was that is important to us and what we wanted in terms of labor regulation. And so I think the Grow New York Farms Coalition was a highlight of my career. One, because I worked with amazing partners. So Steve Ammerman, who at the time was at New York Farm Bureau, and Rick Zimmerman, who was the lobbyist for both NEDPA and New York State vegetable growers, and myself worked together as part of the staff leadership team. And then we had farmer leaders from all of our organizations driving the future and the work of Grow New York Farms. And it empowered workers to also have a voice. And one of the things I will never forget is parking a tractor on the front lawn of the New York State Capitol, bringing in a semi of hay bales, and having hundreds of farm workers and farm owners show up together with green shirts on to talk about what we were for, which is the future of agriculture in New York State. And I had the opportunity, the privilege really, to go out and video some workers in Western New York. And after that rally, they came up to their farm owner and myself, and every single one of those workers wanted their picture taken with us because we helped them be able to share their voice.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so, getting a little teary here. So
Sorry.
that is empowering people to have a seat at the table, empowering people to use their voice and to be solutions-based, I think is really what the success of NEDPA has been founded on.
Yeah. That's amazing. The visuals must have been incredible.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, you were recently awarded the Leaving It Better Award from the New York State Fair. Congratulations on that. The Leaving It Better Award is given in recognition of the recipient's legacy impact on the agricultural community. So what does this recognition mean to you personally?
So I'm not somebody that likes to be recognized. I always
Mm,
wanted NEDPA to be recognized because what we did was about the farmers, right? But to be recognized by your peers, there's no greater reward. And what I mean by that is when you're recognized by your peers, then you know that you've come to the table, you know you've been a good collaborator, and you know that people see that you were there for the right reasons, right?
mhm.
And so that's what that award means to me is that it was a recognition of the partnerships that I've been part of throughout the last 13 years. And that is more meaningful to me than I can express in words because so many of my colleagues have become friends and we've done some really good work together. And it hasn't all been easy,
I'm
but
sure.
it's been meaningful. And that award is the culmination of just great partnerships.
Wonderful. So what's next for you?
So, um, ironically, I started a new position this week.
Mhm.
So I'm the interim executive director of Milk for Health, which is a 75-year-old organization in Western New York who works with dairy promotion checkoff dollars to make sure that we're highlighting farmer image, talking about the good work farmers are doing. Milk for Health does a lot with Buffalo City inner schools. So going into the schools and doing cooking programs and doing outreach with young people in Buffalo City schools. They work with the Ralph Wilson Museum Explore and More and do outreach education there. And there's Saturday programming. And so I'm in a really different position now. So I'm
Mhm.
shifting from being very policy oriented to highlighting the amazing people that I've worked for all my life, which is dairy farmers. And by the way, we also have a dairy farm. So my friends at Pro Dairy call me the dairy mom. So I'm also the mother of a dairy farmer and wife. And so I have a really cool opportunity in front of me, which was to work alongside a board that's dedicated to making sure that we connect with consumers and they know the good things farmers are doing.
So it's just continuing the good work, it sounds.
Yeah, it's going to be different and fun.
Great. All right. So what does it mean to you to be a woman in ag?
So to talk about being a woman in ag, I have to talk about my roots. I grew up working alongside my dad, my uncle, and my two brothers on our dairy farm. And
Mhm.
so my dad instilled in me that it is the right person for the job. So what I was really good at was milking cows alongside my dad. And if I had to jump in the tractor and chop hay, I could, but it wasn't my favorite thing to do, right? But milking cows was like my favorite thing to do. And so as a young woman, I think my dad really instilled in me that you focus on your skill set, you focus on your strengths, and that's where you spend some time. I've had an amazing ride in my career in agriculture. So after college, I actually was a 4-H educator in Eastern New York. So I did youth programming through 4-H and was in Schoharie County and worked with amazing families. And I learned so much from those families. And that's when I really began the partnerships, realizing how important the partnerships were. So as a young woman, I had a lot of energy and I learned to utilize children's days off from school to do programming so that they had something to do and it was positive for them and positive for me. And we did more programming. And so I think being a woman in agriculture, in the career opportunities I have, I've more focused on my skill set and the partnerships than I have, I guess, my gender. And I think I've always looked for mentors. So I've had some amazing both male and female mentors, but some of the female mentors that I've had, Maureen Torrey, when I first came into this role, I'm not sure that she sleeps. She reads, she educates, and she's been amazing. I talked about my female ag teacher. I talked about my female principal. And so I think that I've been a woman in whether it's my personal life or my professional life, that I surround myself with other women who have traits or qualities that I aspire to be like. So I've surrounded myself with some amazing female leaders in my career. One of the things I didn't talk about with NEDPA is we are part of the dairy issues team. Right now, that team is all females, but it was a mix in the early part of my career. And all of us on that team have a different skill set, and we worked off from each other, and we did really important work. So I guess being a female in agriculture is a privilege to surround myself with other collaborators who have a different skill set so that we can work hard for dairy farmers and for agriculture as a whole.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Tonya.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was fun to reminisce an amazing career with NEDPA.
Yeah. And certainly good luck with the next phase.
Great. Thank you.
I really enjoyed your conversation with Tonya, and I feel like something that she highlighted a lot when you guys talked is something that has come up on this podcast before, which is that farmers need to have a voice at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's pretty obvious, yes, there are lobbyist groups and advocates that are out there speaking on behalf of farmers, and I think those people have a place. But that is really just not the same as having actual farmers come and talk about what they're going through in reality and what they really need, especially from like a policy standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like the story she told of the tractors and the hay bales on the New York Capitol lawn, it was like a powerful image, even just hearing about it and not seeing it. And I also just really appreciated hearing her talk about how much it meant to those farmers to have that place to go and share their stories and make their voices heard. Like, clearly, she's doing some great work in making sure that farmers are really represented with what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talk all the time about the disconnect between farmers and consumers.
Yeah.
I feel like we don't talk about as much the disconnect between farmers and like policy and lawmakers.
Yeah.
They say that they want to listen to the farmers, and they do sometimes. But there still is a disconnect, because the reality is you can't know what an industry is really like until you're inside of it.
Yep.
And so it's really important to sit down and have those conversations and listen to what it is that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I just loved in hearing Tonya's interview was how she talked about finding your strengths in both like your personal and professional life, regardless of any possible gendered stereotypes associated with those strengths and passions. And I think that's like a pretty powerful thing to hear, is like, especially, if you're working very collaboratively on like a farm or in the ag industry as a woman, find where you're passionate, find what you're good at, and just hit that head on. And even if it is something that is stereotypically woman's work, or maybe it's something that is stereotypically man's work, it doesn't matter, because if you're good at it, that's your calling.
Yeah, I agree. And this is a story we've heard before on here. I'm thinking back to Kathy Smith, who's an extension educator, and she works in forestry. We talked to her earlier this season, and how she talked about how she was tested sometimes because she was a woman in what is traditionally more of a male-dominated field. And ultimately, though, it didn't matter, because she was always able to kind of like prove her mettle. Not that she should have had to, but it was also something that she felt very strongly about and very passionately about. And so it didn't matter that there were people who were kind of testing her, because she knew that that's where she was supposed to be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that wraps things up for us. Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. If you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode or the podcast, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for visiting the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Candace.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Rosbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock. Mixed by Justin Berger. Music by Tin Bird Shadow.